Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli, and we're talking about this book, The Stress Solution. Gosh, we all need this right now.
Yes.
Desperately, I think. All right. I actually wanted to talk to you about a lot of stuff in here is work related, which I really want to get to. But for whatever reason, I got an intuitive hit that I needed to talk to you about prejudice first, because you actually had a section in here about prejudice. And
hmm
it's interesting linking stress to prejudice, because I don't think it's necessarily kind of like, what? How does that work? And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about that, because it seems like in both directions that there's a lot of prejudice that's happening right now.
Yes.
In both parties, whether it's Democrat or Republicans, can point to each other and say, yeah, you're prejudiced, honestly. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that first and
hmm
foremost. What is, I think we all have a common understanding of prejudice, but from your perspective, given your background in clinical psychology, how would you describe what prejudice is?
The simplest way I would describe it, CJ, is a distorted view of another, an inaccurate view of another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's
It's
an inaccurate view.
looking at someone at face value. It's not, and that's why I emphasize empathy so much in the book, because empathy looks beyond the surface into the heart and soul of another human being to see who they really are,
Mm-hmm.
not just what they look like,
Mm-hmm.
what their religion is, what country they're from, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, when we employ empathy, and we know how to listen empathically, we usually find out that people are more alike than they are different.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I'm sure.
Yeah, and what do you think is in a lot of these chapters, and I'm not sure if the one on the psychology, I didn't read that one as carefully, is that you talk about the psychology behind it. What causes us to have not understand or have not have empathy or understand another person?
Well, we all grow up in certain little, I call them little countries. Our family is a little country.
Yeah.
So when we're 2 years old and 3 years old and 5 and 10, we take this non-representative sample, and whatever we hear from them, we come to think is accurate. One of the examples I use in the book on the chapter on prejudice is I have a client who is an MBA. He's a CEO, very intelligent man, actually a good man in many ways. But he said to me one day, my office window was open in the summer, and he said to me, dogs were barking. And we were talking about athletes for some reason. And he said, oh, dogs don't like black people. And I said, oh, dogs don't like black people? Why is that? And he said,
Right.
well, it's something about the smell. And I said, oh, really? And I said, well, how did you learn that? And he said, well, there was a black family at the corner of our neighborhood, and my mother always said, don't take the dogs down there. Black dogs don't like black people. And I said, by the way, have you ever taken the dogs down? Did you
Yeah.
ever take the dogs down there? He said, no. And I said, have you ever had your dogs in the presence of a black person? He said, no. He said, now you're making me feel silly. And I said, I'm not trying to make you feel silly, but part of our work is to uncover some of our
Mm-hmm.
old conditioning that makes no sense. It's not based
Mm-hmm.
on fact. And
Mm-hmm.
empathy is very fact oriented. So
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I have an uncle who's black, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we call him the dog whisperer because he's trained our dogs, he's trained my aunt's dogs. He has dogs, our dogs love him, and I've never noticed anything about the smell.
Right.
So, I mean, that's an example of a 56-year-old CEO who's very educated and bright, but grew up with this distortion about another race
Right.
that has no bearing in truth. But when you're 4, 5, 6, 10, and your mother tells you that, what do you think?
Right.
It must be true, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, then so you wait until you're now you said he was 52,
Six.
56. So
Yes.
he had wait it was 54 years later that he's like
Yes.
actually
Yes.
finally questioning those beliefs. But you know what? Hey, that's fair. There's so many beliefs that I have that I'm questioning now at 50, 54. I mean, it happens. There's a whole bunch of things that your parents tell you that you believe in that aren't necessarily true. So, well, that aren't necessarily fact based when you actually start
Yes.
looking into those
Yes.
kinds of things. So, when you look at the energy that people are deploying. And what I think was so interesting, even about the way that you approached your client, of course it's a client, but approach it as like, oh yeah, let me actually understand what, instead of jumping, what you
Yes.
typically see is people
Yes.
jump into the argument like, how
Yes.
can you say that? Blah blah blah. And then there's just an instant argument that
Yes.
ensues. And what's interesting is you just got curious, like, oh,
Yes.
how come? It is that how we get to the facts? Is that how you suggest people remove themselves from instantly jumping into the fray and start just getting curious? Like, so what makes you think that?
Empathy slows everything down so that we can use the thinking part of the brain. When we react quickly, and quick reactors often are projecting their history into the situation. I often try to teach people that we're taking old faces and putting them on new faces. Okay?
Yes.
So I can look at you and say, you look like my ex-wife.
Yeah.
I don't have an ex-wife, but I can,
Right.
or somebody I knew,
Right.
or somebody who bullied me in
Right.
school. And automatically I'm reacting quickly. When we're
Right.
reacting quickly, we're reacting through emotion and old conditioning.
Right.
Empathy slows everything down so that we can use the thinking part of the brain to actually be curious.
Yeah.
And when you're genuinely, authentically curious,
Yeah.
people will talk to you and
Yeah.
they'll reveal all kinds of things about themselves. I mean, people were asking me during this presidential race, how can you talk to people who are going to vote for Trump? How can you talk to people who vote for Clinton? And I say to my friends, I talk to them because I'm curious about how did they come to make that decision? How
Mm-hmm.
did you come to think that he or she was the right person?
Mm.
Well, my cousin Louis, who lives in New Jersey, he works right next to a guy who was a political science major in college, and he said that Hillary said that blah blah blah. And you get all this information that really
Mm.
is coming from where? Where's it coming from?
Yeah.
Are you examining it? Are you being thoughtful about it to even find out what the facts are?
Yeah. What's interesting about what you're saying too is that usually people think of empathy as kind of a soft thing, like, oh, I'm going to empathize with someone. But the explanation that you gave was more like, I'm getting kind of curious, and let's actually unwind all the different thoughts. Like you had, so I'm presuming that someone heard something by their cousin who's a political scientist about Hillary, and instead of researching and finding out whether that was true or not, they just instantly voted it for or against Hillary. I don't know in that particular case.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's basically have kind of questioning yourself, like, do you know that that's true, or is that really true, or if not, how do you know that that's not true? And I think a lot of the things that's been interesting is all the analysis that people are doing on immigration. Do immigrants actually commit more crimes? Are those 7 countries actually truly, a problem or not? And the facts are, according to some sources, that is not true. Like, that the facts don't bear out necessarily the current thinking with the administration. But then there's a group that will say, well, that's fake news. And so you get into this this questioning, like, well, I'm questioning the facts that you're presenting to me, which I find is I don't know what to do when someone says something like that. I mean, I'm feeling like the information that I'm having from the New York Times is pretty accurate, but then someone throws into the fake news scenario, and then I'm not sure what to say, right? Because
And this is what's requiring a tremendous for all of us to be tremendously disciplined to use empathy. Empathy is the capacity to understand and respond to the unique experiences of another. It's not an emotion. From my perspective, it's a capacity. It's an assessment tool. It allows us to slow down and assess.
right,
So we hear things all the time on the internet. We're bombarded with information. What's true and what's not true? Well, you have to decide. Empathy teaches you who to trust
right,
because you can examine from a thoughtful position someone else's character. So when I hear on the news that in Denmark there was a terrorist attack last week, we have to find out, did that actually exist? Did
yeah,
it happen?
yeah,
Or was it some news clip that somebody else made up? That we can find out the truth if
yeah,
we're disciplined about it. We can find out the truth about other human beings if we're disciplined about it.
right,
One of the things about prejudice that I think, getting back to your earlier point, is that people don't realize is when we have prejudices, okay, if I immediately feel prejudice against you or toward you, even if I'm not aware of it consciously, I'm starting to feel stressed. because I don't feel comfortable with you. What happens when we feel stress? We release the stress hormone cortisol. What does cortisol do? It causes anxiety. It causes a sense of distrust. It reduces empathy and it causes black and white thinking. So
Mm.
we go around in obsessive thinking. So now I can't think clearly with you because I don't trust you.
Mm.
Empathy allows us to slow down and actually interact with the real person and find out what the objective truth is. When you give and receive empathy, you produce oxytocin, which
Mm-hmm.
is the hormone that women produce when you're pregnant. It
Mm-hmm.
creates love, support, friendliness, trust. It
Mm-hmm.
reduces inflammation. It increases generosity. So
Mm-hmm.
when we give and receive empathy, we connect, we feel safe. I can be vulnerable and be open with you.
Mm.
We have prejudice, our nervous systems talk to each other. We
Right.
sense it. If I'm that tense with you and there's something about you that I have this bias, you're gonna know it. You
Right.
may know it consciously, but you don't feel comfortable with me. So
Right.
you're not gonna open up with me.
Right.
Why
Right.
would you? Your brain is telling you to protect yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I just talked to a dear friend who she's literally on the opposite sides of her father on the political spectrum, and they just were visiting and literally had a blowout over politics. You know, these are two people who love each other, and they just literally had a blowout because one person said X, the other person said, X prime, divided by 100, or like whatever it was. They were just arguing back and forth. And I think her father just got up and walked away. And I think it's hard because I think it's partially you have to be cognizant that you are getting wound up.
Yes.
Because I think, and in some ways, what I'm hearing, if based on what you just said, is if it's about slowing down, it's about when the minute so and so said X and it triggered me, X went, you know, I should have
Yes.
said, hold on, let me actually go get a glass of water or something to kind of calm yourself down and get to a place where you're breathing, you're back in your body, you're not getting stressed out, and then go
Yes.
back and say, so you said, X prime. So I'm just curious, what makes you, I'm curious what makes you think about X prime in that way. I think that would have maybe solved the problem if she had
Yes.
maybe taken
Yeah.
like the minute someone said something and you felt yourself kind of getting stressed out, instead of stressing yourself out, stressing the other person. And then like at a certain point, I think it's really hard. If both people
Mhm.
are stressed out, someone has to de-escalate because there's nothing productive that will happen in
Well,
the
I say to
conversation.
couples all the time, somebody has to wave the white flag and
Yes.
say, look, we're winding up. Okay.
Right.
Empathy goes out the window in an environment that's too hot or too cool.
Yes.
So when we're escalating, you're starting to yell at me or raise your voice. I'm raising my voice. The
Right.
facts and objective truth goes out the window. That's when
Right.
all women are like this, all men are like that, your
Yeah.
family's like that. You
Yeah.
throw in the kitchen sink, and
Right.
it's all these generalized
Yeah.
cognitive. That's what cognitive behavioral therapy is. It focuses on the distortions in thinking, and
Right.
as we become more emotional and defensive, we start saying things that don't make any sense.
Right. You always say that to me. You've like
Yeah.
always, really, always.
Yeah. You never listen to me.
Exactly. Okay, so I think that and it's funny because I actually was a mediator and in the small claims court, and when you're a mediator and you hear two sides of the stories, and if you are literally neutral, you don't go into your own personal story on whether that person should have paid so and so on time, and like
Mhm.
their birthday party was a disaster and they need to refund the person for 5,000, like all these kinds of things I would hear. And literally if I'd walk into the place of that person who is complaining about being ripped off for the birthday party, and I thought, okay, so, and I'd hear their story. I'm like, okay, like I can see being pretty ticked off as a result of that. And then I went into the perspective of the business owner who, had, and had all of his or her issues and explained everything. I'm like, hey, I can see that too. So it's
Mhm.
really about seeing, you really can start seeing both sides. And,
Yes.
and see, there's a universe ringing to us saying, yes, that's right.
Sorry.
It's okay. And so it's interesting because I was on a plane, and after doing mediation, that was best gift that I ever got because I was on the plane, and I was sitting next to a rancher in Montana. I'm from Seattle, so I'm kind of from this very super liberal place. And my sister-in-law is gay and has a son that she and her partner had created. And this gentleman said, I don't even know how it came up, but he said, yeah, gay people should never be allowed to be married or have children. And I was like, okay. And I said, and it wasn't me, so, but it was someone who I dearly love that had both of those things. And I said, so I'm curious why do you believe that? Or what is it that you believe? And he's like, well, I believe in the sanctity of marriage, and marriage is defined in this particular way to me. And when someone changes the definition of marriage, it makes a sacred union that I have with my wife feel less than. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I said, well, how does it make it feel less than? And he said, because it feels like people who aren't really deciding to be together are going to be able to like have children. And I was like, and I said, so what's wrong with, can't two gay people love each other and have children, and why can't they be together? And he's like, well, and he had this whole story about why gay people can, and it was so interesting. But at the end, I literally listened to his perspective, and I thought, okay, I totally see. If I was a rancher in Montana and I had those kind of experiences, and he was dearly in love with his wife, and he really cared about the sanctity of marriage, and he had all these definitions about marriage, I thought, okay, I get it. And he walked away saying, actually, I think gay people can have children and be fine. It was one of the best airplane flights ever, and it really was the thing that you're talking about, just going in, just getting curious and unpacking all the different assumptions that people make.
You were uncovering his thought process, but
Yeah.
you weren't judging him. I can tell by your voice tone. You weren't
Yeah.
judging him.
No.
Authentically wanted to know. You
Yeah.
were curious. You want how do you arrive at this position?
Yeah.
And then and it wasn't an argument. You want to understand how he got there,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
opened him up in some way.
Yeah. It doesn't happen all the time though, because on YouTube I had this really ridiculous and fun tarot card reading with a tarot card reader about Trump. And it really upset people, and I feel badly that it upset people. But there were comments all around, and people were just stabbing each other like with knives. And I finally said, well, why don't our country is doomed if we can't actually bring ourselves together and figure out what each is trying to say. So, what is it that you mean when you say Trump is blah blah blah? And what unfortunately what happened is it came unwound where the person just started like, look, why don't you look at all these different things? And then everyone just started jumping on each other. And I finally just deleted the whole ability to comment on that YouTube because it was so dismaying. But
Yes.
I don't know. Sometimes I think I don't know. I mean, I tried, but it didn't seem possible sometimes for us to rise above that. And when that happens, because sometimes people can't have the capacity to be curious and listen, what's the best course of action when that happens?
Well, we have to know when to de-invest. And if I'm talking to you and I'm trying and I'm asking open-ended questions and I truly am curious as to the way you think, but all it's doing is you're getting more defensive, you're getting more
Yeah.
angry, and
Yeah.
I can see that understanding is going out the window.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have to, back up.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not the time, or
Yeah.
maybe it's never going to be the time. Maybe there are people you can't get through to.
Right.
I have a hard time believing that because I've been told so many times that so and so won't talk to you, or she won't talk to you, or he doesn't have the empathy gene, or she doesn't. And but I have the opportunity to talk more than once.
Yeah.
So if you make a relationship and you change brain chemistry when you make a relationship, even if, I mean, I've talked to white supremacists, I've talked to people that have beaten other people. I worked in a prison for a while where when you have the continuity of, okay, let's go back to this. Why are black people bad and why are white people? And when you go over it, and then you finally get the story. I wrote a blog a long time ago about this. I did a favor to single mom, and she wanted me to interview her son because he was a white supremacist. And he came in and he called me, he called me a Dago and a Wop, and you Italian people, you're all in the mafia.
Oh
He
my
started
goodness.
insulting me, and I was like sitting there.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
and I've been called everything under the
Right.
book
Yeah.
business. So, you sit back and I said, okay, okay. And then he started with the black people, and I said, I can see that you really have this hatred. I don't really think you hate me, but you're talking about black people, you really hate them. But you must have had some experience somewhere along the line with black people before you went down south. And, he's from Boston. How did he
Oh
end up?
wow.
You
Wow,
know,
interesting.
and so he said to me, they grew up single mom. Father was an alcoholic, left the family when the two boys were 2 and 3. He grew up in a black section of outside of Boston. Okay, on the bus, there were all black kids and these two white kids. These two.
Oh.
So what happened? They got pushed around. They got
Mm.
bullied. And then he had this thing, and so and the hurt from his father not protecting him, and his mother not knowing what to do.
Mm.
They lived there into high school. Okay, so then he quits high school, but he has this hatred for these people that hurt him. Doesn't it sound like Hitler's story with the Jews?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
wanted to be this great artist, and he thought he had this great ability, but then he believed the Jews control the art,
Right.
the old guild and all of that, and the same thing. It was an old wound that hadn't been healed.
Wow.
And then he started asking me, well, black people still aren't. They're not very bright. You're associated with Harvard, but it's all those people get. It's all because of equal opportunity they get. I said, you know what? You keep telling me that black people are stupid. What if I get some of the people I know at Harvard, the black people, those black people aren't very bright, and we can have them come here, and we can give you an IQ test, and we can give them an IQ test, and we can really see.
Right.
I don't need to do that. I have street smarts, and I said, I understand that, but maybe you do have street smarts, but I think you know in your heart that these people are not unintelligent,
Mm-hmm.
but they hurt you. But some black people hurt you, some black kids on a bus, just like some
Mm.
15 white kids hurt the two black kids. We had
Mm-hmm.
and in the end, he had sort of, he started was getting misty and teary. And
Oh.
long story short, I never saw him again, but I know from his mom that he left at some point and did go back to, he got his GED and then went to college, went to an IT school. And I
Wow.
don't know the rest of the story. They all, she moved too.
Yeah.
But it was getting, when he started
Mm.
insulting me, not
Mm.
fighting back, as you said earlier,
Mm.
offensive. How am I going to take it seriously? He doesn't even know me.
Right.
So he's calling
Right.
me names and my family's
Right.
in the mafia and all of this.
Oh my
What is
goodness.
it?
Wow. But what is so beautiful about that story is that when you find out the backstory of where these beliefs come from, right? In the case of the CEO, like I guess this guy had a lot of belief in his mom and whatever his mom said about black people. I don't know. But in the case of that gentleman who's a white supremacist, you listen to the story and I feel a lot of compassion. I've been that kid that has been beaten up on the bus. I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, and as you were telling the story, I was thinking, I wonder if I have certain prejudices against certain people because there's this one girl that kind of, and she has a certain kind of demeanor that I actually probably do have a prejudice against. Like now she was in my mind like a slutty girl. And so now like any person who's like a slutty girl, I have kind of like, she was the one who bullied me. So
Yes.
I definitely have that myself. So you can look and think, well, okay, I get it. Like I get it.
Yes.
And it makes you have, I think the part of getting curious and unpacking all of it is the part that is the revelatory part for both parties, right? Because for you, and for you, you probably have like, oh, I've heard 1,000 times, because you're a clinical psychologist, so you hear like, oh yeah, someone beat you up. But for someone who's like myself, where I'm talking to someone who I may not know and that has a prejudice, yeah, there's always something that when you unpack what's happening.
We all grow up, I think, with prejudices about other people and about ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody grows up in a completely objective environment where all the feedback we get about ourselves and what we hear about other people is completely objective and is completely truthful. So we grow up, we write a novel about ourselves and about other people to some degree. Our job as adults, I think, is to make it a nonfiction book. When we look into the eyes of the people around us early in life, they feed back to us something about ourselves. We don't know who we are. So
Right.
we write this story because we're looking into these mirrors. Like if you're my mother or my sister, I'm looking at, so whatever you tell me, if you tell me I'm stupid or you're impatient with me or you're neglectful toward me, then I start to feel like I'm not good enough. You
Mm.
know, and but I don't realize that it's like when you're a kid, it's like looking into a circus mirror. It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily getting an accurate reflection. So if you look into a cracked mirror, you get a cracked view of yourself.
Mm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
distortion. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I met the woman tonight who's, I mean, honestly, she's absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
She's so preoccupied with her appearance because her mother was so critical of her.
Mm.
She brought in pictures of her mom when her mom was young, and the mom was really quite beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that's the relationship they had. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and always your hair doesn't look well. That dress doesn't look good. You need to put more makeup on. Look at your face looks so pale. And so, you know, this
Oh.
poor woman is thinking that there's something wrong with her when really what she has to uncover is what's been right about her all the while, but she didn't.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are a couple things. So I'm going to switch gears because there's so many things in this book that I could relate to. In fact, when I was reading your book, The Stress Solution, I was preparing a set of PowerPoints for like a 30-person presentation, and I'd actually done these PowerPoints 2 or 3 times before, but I decided it yet wasn't good enough. What does that tell you about projection? so, so okay, so I'm working on these PowerPoints, right? And I'm trying to make them perfect. And I'm reading in your book simultaneously about performance addiction, and I thought I have that. In fact, I'm demonstrating this at this very moment.
Yeah.
So, so talk to us, and I think that there are a couple of I don't know if we'll get to all of them because and I would love dearly to because I think there's some things that happen at work very commonly about why we stress ourselves out at work, and it's the performance addiction, catastrophizing, which you talk about in your book,
Hmm.
personalization and worrying, like all those things. I was literally living proof of that the moment I was reading a book. But let's start with performance addiction. What is it? And yeah, what is it?
It's the belief that perfecting appearance and achieving status will secure love and respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's an irrational belief system that begins in our families and then it's reinforced by our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we get into this point of this perspective where we try to perfect our way into happiness. And if it doesn't work, then we work harder and harder to try to perfect our body or our mind, but it's all focused on achievement and appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people who become scoreboard watchers. They're always comparing and contrasting themselves to other people. So if you get a little bit ahead or your show has more viewers than my show, um, it's not that I don't like you. I just don't want to talk to you, you know, because
Right.
you make me feel uncomfortable because
Right.
I'm competing all the time.
Right.
So it
Right.
makes it very hard to establish love. I mean, performance addicts, they often have relationships that I call have they it's called I call it image love. They fall in
Mm.
love with images and then they get very disappointed as they really get to know people because we all have our flaws. And then that
Mm.
person doesn't reflect back to them this esteem. You know, they want people to idealize them, to adore them, to be
Mm-hmm.
so impressed with them
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't valued for who they are as a child. They're valued for what they achieve. And
Mm-hmm.
so when they notice when they first hit that home run or they get the star role in a play, suddenly they get their parents' eyes.
Right.
And then,
Yay! Yeah, let's
yeah,
go out for a Sunday. Look how great
oh,
you
so
did. Yeah.
that's how I get your interest.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Now I understand.
Yep.
So in order to get love and respect, I have to look right and be right and perform right.
Right.
But who I am, so then it sacrifices character and integrity because character is not as important as achievement. And I think that's a major issue that we're having in our
Mm.
society right now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we know that empathy is down, narcissism is up, we trust fewer people. Americans have fewer friends than they had 15 or 20 years ago, and prejudice has increased.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
stress has increased again and again and again. Even the American Psychological Association just last week said when they did their review of the stress rates are again higher.
Right. So it's so what is the root cause is that you were raised with a family which valued achievement. And so that's the only way that you were valued, loved, and respected. So now
Achievement and appearance.
achievement and appearance. So now that's basically now my formula for success. And I obsessively go
And
out
for love. And for
and for
love.
love. So
Yeah.
so let's take me, my sad story. so, and I definitely had that in my family construct. I think like I bet every Asian person that walks in, I know this is a stereotype, has that. I mean, the whole tiger mom thing.
You Asians
It's
are all
real.
like that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Talk about prejudice against myself and my own kind. But
Yeah.
I can say that. I can say not prejudice, but like I can say that the whole tiger mom thing is a true thing for me, at least. And so
Yep.
this all is like you have to perform. You have to actually perform to be loved. And like anytime you get power, status, whatever. But that's true of society. Like you said, it's something that was raised in my
Yes,
family, and then it's
yes.
reinforced, right, in society. So how does someone unwind from that? Because that's a very hard. I mean, I can see the stress it's caused because nothing is ever good enough. I mean, I literally went to those PowerPoints and I thought, wait enough. I actually delivered this 3 times. This has been getting better and better. Why is this one not good enough? And I thought,
Yeah.
this is ridiculous. Like, this doesn't
Yeah.
make any logical sense. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, I'm only going to spend like X number of hours on this more. And then I'm putting this to rest because it's
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. But how does one, I mean, that's a manifestation of this perfectionism and trying to have people love my PowerPoints and feel like it was a value so that I would be of valued and I'd finally get the love and respect and appearance that I needed. But how does one stop from continuing?
We have to unlearn how we learned it in the first place. And sort of try to understand the people we learned this from because they probably had their own difficulties as well.
Yeah.
And maybe they learn the same thing and they pass it on to us as kids,
Yeah.
or certain cultures do.
Yeah.
So we have to switch a sort of our belief system to realize that in order to have love in life, you're never going to get love just by achieving. It doesn't happen that way. If that were the case, I'd be out of business because I see a lot of very successful people, people in the media, professional athletes, models. You know, they wouldn't be coming to me if they were happy.
Right.
Just like this woman who I told you about before, who's obsessing about her appearance, who's absolutely gorgeous.
Right.
She doesn't know that. She's trying to perfect everything. And what we need to realize is that achievement in appearance is not going to obtain the kind of depth of love that we all long for. Everybody wants to be loved. But if you want to get past that in love phase and really love another person for who they are, and then you want to be loved for who you are, you have to let go. You have to be vulnerable. You have to see the strength of vulnerability. And you have to know how to use empathy from my perspective. Because empathy teaches us who to get close to, who to remain distant from, and who to really know. And how to be known.
It's hard because, so my son, who is 17, said to me, he said, I feel like my life is meaningless. And I said, how come, honey? And he said, I actually I've done all these things. I did well in grade. I did do well in school. I've done, get good grades. I've applied to colleges. I did well on my standardized tests. And now what? Like, what is the whole purpose of this? This is just stupid. I said, there's no meaning in this.
You said, yes, you're right. You don't have to go to college.
And I didn't, and I was like, yeah, and what do you say as a parent? And so I said, yeah, I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. I can understand from your perspective because, it feels like you're doing all these things. And he's like, yeah, I keep on doing these things thinking that would make me happy. And it doesn't make me happy because the minute I do something, I feel happy at that moment. And maybe it lasts for like a day or so and then it's gone. So
Right.
what is the purpose? Is this what life is all about? I said, yeah, at some level it is, but I think, part of it is, then I said, let me actually, I didn't even know what to say because it's right before we were talking right before we went to sleep. And so I took some time and said, you know what, there's this game of life that happens and there's a game that everyone's playing about achievement and money and power and status. And what I find is people who don't play that game often wonder, like they play that game out of like, oh, I don't want to play, and they opt out very early on without knowing that they can play the game. And there's actually fun when you play the game. There is fun when you play the game, but you have to realize it's a game. But there's this other thing that is that creates enduring meaning and happiness, and it's about these other kinds of things like love and connection and finding the things that you love and finding your purpose. And I don't know if you read the email, because I sent him an email because, you know, with teenage boys, I don't know if they read or listen, but it's a hard thing, because even if you decide to opt out of this whole construct of performance addiction, you're in a society that is not in that place. So how do you deal with the reconciliation of, okay, yes, you are now loving and respecting, and like you're generating that love and respect on the inside, when outside there's an incongruence?
He asked, I mean, he's wrestling with great, important questions.
Yeah.
And your way of interacting with him and writing so thoughtfully to him, what are you teaching him? You're not achieving anything together. You were showing him that you love him and that you spent time trying to understand what he's experiencing.
Yeah.
That's part of a connection. That connection makes him feel more secure. It changes his brain chemistry. So what you're teaching him about is the depth of a relationship. You're modeling the depth of a relationship, understanding, not telling him, look, you need to go to college. It's very important. You shouldn't even be talking like that. What's the matter with you?
Oh no, there was that voice happening that
I understand, but you didn't use it.
It was so hard. It was right there. But
what are you going to do if you drop up? You didn't do that. That's what parents do, right?
Yeah, it took like all my will not to, but it was definitely, it's like sitting there yelling in my ear.
But you didn't.
Yeah, I didn't.
And what you're modeling is the depth of relationship makes us happy. Love makes us happy. I've seen people, and I'm sure you have too. Look, we're both competitive. We're both educated. We want to compete. We want to do well. We want to make a difference in people's lives.
Right.
Okay. And that's all fine. But if we don't know how to love, then we failed. I see people at the end of, who have more money than you can imagine. I mean, they don't even know what to do with it, but they don't know how to love. And if you can teach a young person, if you can teach your son at his age, something, achieving, finding a career path that really means something to you, that you have a passion for, is wonderful. But you're going to have a passion for other people too. You have to learn how to make connections. You have to learn how to love. Because when you have that in your own life, in your own home, and you go out into that world where all the performance addicts live, and you got to perform, you have resilience inside you. Because you're going out into the world with a brain chemistry that's balanced. Now I'm ready to deal with that. When I see couples, I mean, I did a consultation with 2 doctors this morning, okay? Yeah. They are nuts about where the kids have to go to this private school. The kids are 4 and 6. Like, leave them alone. Let them play. Let them have fun.
Yes, yeah.
They're talking about they got to go here and they got to go there and they're in tennis. I don't know how you get a 4-year-old in tennis. They're just so uptight, and they're not happy with each other. But they're very bright. They're very attractive. They've both come from different countries to this country, and they've made it in this world, okay? They're both MDs, but they're not happy. And what are they teaching their kids? They're giving them the best of everything, but they're also giving them their anxiety and their stress. These kids aren't learning how to love. They're learning that achievement is the all. It's everything. And they're going to be little performance addicts.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm much better, but I'm somewhat better, because my kid said to me the other day, he's like, well, I haven't done anything. I just feel awful. And I thought, oh my God, he got that from me. And I've never said anything like that, but I think in my behavior, I say it every day. Like, oh my gosh, what have I done? How am I going to do, and I've slowed down since my 30s, when I kind of acted that way. And that's when it was in the extreme, but it's no longer that way. But I think they still kind of have that, oh gosh, if I'm sitting around doing nothing, that's a problem. And and I feel awful that construct, which I believe I created, is in them. But what can you do? I don't really know what to do at this point. I
You're working it out with them.
I hope so.
Look, we have two daughters, two adult daughters now, and when one of the oldest when she was in the eighth grade, she was a track star. She was varsity high school, okay?
Yeah.
So she was fine, and then I sometimes I would try to get away and go to a track meet, okay?
Yeah.
And I get away, I rearrange patients, I'm working in a hospital, I get there, and the big track meet, and I don't say a word, I don't yell, I don't say anything, I just stand there, I'm up on a mound, and she turns around and she looks, Dad, what are you doing here? I said, I came to watch you. It was like embarrassing. So I said to her later that night, I said, honey, how come you were so upset that I was there? She said, Dad, I just want to have fun. I said, what do you mean? She goes, I love running, but we just have fun. And I said, yeah, okay. She goes, no, it's not okay. Because if you were running, you would kill yourself to win. And I don't want to have that feeling.
So you didn't say anything, just your ominous presence, like
just there.
in that movie Amadeus in the background.
It's my crime. I didn't even say anything. Just my mere presence created stress. This is unbelievable. Like, I've learned about these parents that yell. I'm not doing anything. I didn't even tell her to run track.
Okay, that makes me feel way better.
So you feel okay? And they're okay, these two kids. They went through college. They're fine.
Okay. Everything will be okay.
But I represented to her.
Yeah.
So, we had to have conversations, and I realized I have to let go more.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that I was pressuring her, but she knows me.
Yes. She knows you well, right? She's been, at that point, she'd had like whatever.
I'm like you. I'm an achiever.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is that what she didn't want to be that way?
Yeah. Wow.
She didn't want to be that way.
Yeah.
She just wanted to run and have fun.
Oh yeah.
And today both our girls go to spinning classes every morning. I mean, but they, and I've gone with them. But it's amazing to me. They have fun.
Yeah.
When you go to the gym, you see these people. They're counting the calories. They're so stressed, but they have fun. That was her lesson to me. So, and she was in high school, so it's just like your son too. We kind of do it parallel. Freud was asked, I believe it was in 1936, he was asked this question: How do you become a balanced person? He said, well, you either go into analysis or have a child.
That's absolutely true. Because as you were telling that story, I was thinking about my eldest son, and the highest value he has is fun. And I'm almost like, what is this fun? What does someone do with this? And actually, I love fun. But I think I had never thought until this very moment that he could be my role model in learning about fun.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'm role modeling what it means to look like a performance addict. Hopefully a reformed performance addict. And he's showing to me what it means to have fun and to be kind of a lighthearted.
Sure.
Yeah, like your daughter is when she's in spinning class. Like, that's beautiful that she's having fun in spinning, because oftentimes I'm not. But you know what? It's funny because I was in a spinning class and I thought, it's funny because the languaging of the teachers are like, come on, you can do it, let's just grind through this, and I thought, part of the languaging is unhelpful. And then I thought, I'm just going to create my own little inner landscape. And I thought, wow, I'm just going to get all meditative and think, oh, I feel my heartbeat. Wow, I can actually feel, look at it. I can really feel how hard my heart is beating.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And I was getting into my breathing and all that stuff, and that class became fun.
Yeah,
So,
and I love it. I mean, I just love it. But I do a class. I have one of the bikes with the computer on it because I
Yes.
can't get to a gym. But I just love it. I mean, I love to exercise. I love the intensity of it. But it is interesting when you're with different instructors because you can pick out the performance addicts. And I love the ones that love the music. I love the ones that pick great music because they talk about the music. Then there's the others that are so intense they don't even know what the hell the music is. They don't say anything about the artist. it's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it.
And their nervous systems are talking to the people in the class, just like we were talking about.
Right. But it makes you anxious because you're like, yeah, I got to get up that hill. Like, keep
So
on
I
burning
give
those
his literacy
calories.
instructor, and then it all becomes, and people are looking at each other to see who's turning it up, you know.
I love it. Oh, this has been so delightful. Thank you so much. I'd love to, there was like four other questions that I had, and then four other whole sections. Can I have you on again? That was just so
I
wonderful.
would love to talk with you again. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed talking with you. You're a delightful person,
Thank
and
you.
I can tell you have a very warm heart. So
Oh, thank
it's
you.
nice to talk with you. But I'd
Yeah,
love to do this again.
I
You
would love
let me
to.
know.
Okay, I will. I'm going to go because I have all these other questions. I got issues. I need some help, and other people do too. All right.
Help each other. We'll help each other.
Exactly. We've been talking to Dr. Ciaramicoli. Did I totally mess up your name, Ciaramicoli? Is that right?
Ciaramicoli. Oh, you made a
Ciaramicoli.
mistake. What? I can't forgive you for that. I'm
I'm
not going to be on
sorry.
this show.
Please come back on. Thank you so much. We've been talking about The Stress Solution. Really great book. Lots of really important. I thought this was great for work stress, any
Hmm.
kind of stress that you have. It was great. So we'll have you back to talk about work stress because I think so many of us are suffering. Thank you so much. And thank you. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.